Yeah.
Yes. Indeed. Okay. Thank you for joining us for the Resiliency Summit today. And we're going to go ahead and get started with the Climate Resilient Future Breakout. So we're really pleased to hear from state, tribal, and local government leaders across the state to share with us how they're addressing climate adaptation and preparedness, the challenges and opportunities and solutions. My name is Ann Miller, I'm the director of the Colorado Resiliency Office, and I'm joined by Morgan Ferris and Julia Masters from our team. So we look forward to hearing from our panelists, and next, afterwards, we'll have a short panel discussion and a group dialogue. So if you would be willing to put your name and your organization or where you're from in the chat so we get a sense of who's in the room. And we'll go ahead and get started. So as Shale mentioned during the presentation, we're going to just ask folks to hold their comments in the chat until after the presentation. So let's go ahead and get started with the next slide. So I think we've kind of covered this, and welcome again. We have 3 different panelists, and I'll do a short introduction. Jonathan Asher, he's currently serving as the incoming director of the new governor's Office of Climate Preparedness and Disaster Recovery, after serving as Governor Polis's senior policy advisor for natural resources and environment. He's got years of experience in working on policy issues in DC and worked with Governor Polis as a senior policy advisor as well. Chairman Manuel Hart is a member of the Ute Mountain Ute tribe and was raised on the reservation in Towah. He's happily married with 6 children and 16 grandchildren, with 23 years commitment to his tribe. He's got 10 years committed to the council and 12 years as the chairman. Mr. Hart was first elected into council in 1995. And he served as chairman, vice chairman, treasurer, and secretary custodian. Chairman Hart is a strong advocate for education, housing, water, economic development, and a recognized leader by many Native American organizations. And so we really are pleased to have you. A real honor. Finally, Scott Cowman got 25 years of experience in the environmental field, and since 2015, he's been the director of the Environmental Health Department of Routt County. Prior to this work, he was a watershed manager for the U.S. Forest Service and an environmental and reclamation manager in Northwest Colorado. He's got experience in many different areas, from project management, air quality, clean water, etc., and serves on a lot of different boards, including the Yampa River Fund Board. And he is here today to talk to us about the Climate Action Plan in Routt County. So without further ado, I will go ahead and turn it over to Jonathan Asher to get us started from the state's perspective in the new office.
Sure, thanks, Ann. I appreciate it. And hopefully I'm just hearing it in my own headphones, so there's no like echo or anything. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today and kind of introduce the new office to everybody. As folks probably know, certainly after the Marshall Fire and last legislative session, we took a very kind of proactive approach to addressing not only some of the kind of immediate recovery needs, but wanting to take a head out of the sand, kind of eyes wide open approach, particularly in the governor's office towards climate adaptation. We know how much climate will be impacting the state going forward. And I think we really recognize that for us, there's a important need here that as we're investing heavily in recovering from disasters, we're not only thinking about the past, but really taking a very proactive, forward-looking approach to ensure that we're planning ahead, doing everything that we can to avoid future disasters, to minimize impacts, to take, as it's kind of spelled out in the legislation that created the office, to take a very kind of data-driven and scientific approach to understanding and planning for the climate impacts that are going to come. And I appreciate the intro. And I spent, I'm from Colorado originally, but I'm a former raft guide, and had spent a ton of time outside, and had spent 15 years in DC, and went to DC largely because being outside every day saw a lot of the impacts that were kind of already starting, even 15, 20 years ago. And remember some of the very early IPCC reports coming out and reading. And I think one of the things that resonates with me today is how amazingly even those sort of early reports track with what we're seeing on the ground. And so I think that just underscores for us that there are known areas that we should be taking a very proactive approach with, and working to get ahead of. And so I'm excited with our new office that we will be working closely with the resiliency office, but in particular at the governor level to really guide all of our state agencies, guide state policy, guide state budget decision making, around planning for that future, getting ahead of what we can, and not simply ignoring the impacts that are going to be coming our way. So that's kind of the main kind of goal and function that will serve. I think DOLA does an amazing job of interacting with all of our local governments. And we're, and additional partners, and we're just very excited to be coming on board to really have a, governor's office focused direction, ensuring that all of our state agencies, the initiatives that we have in place are working in conjunction together, are working well together, and are going to be setting the state on an approach to get ahead of and address the challenges that we face. The governor's state of the state really focused on kind of the idea and concept of what do we want Colorado to be like when we turn 150. And I think that's a root question for kind of our office, and a lot of what governors focused on these days. Recognizing that so many of our issue areas, challenges are interconnected. We can't simply look at one thing in a silo, and so much of this is underpinned by the impacts of climate change and what we're already seeing, but certainly what we're going to continue to see. So, I think our goal is to take a very proactive, eyes wide open approach, and start to kind of act like a GIS map is kind of how I describe it, where we want to lay on what we know in terms of oncoming climate impacts with what we know about likely population changes, demographic shifts, what we know about our state policies, and plans and initiatives going forward. How do we layer those all together so that we're working with as much of a comprehensive, coordinated approach as possible? And that's probably the most salient elements for this conversation. The other kind of world that my office will be heading up, which I think will want to work very closely with everyone here on, is just that when there is a disaster, how are we recovering in the most in the best way possible? We in the governor's office were following the Marshall Fire, and certainly any number of other challenges and disasters that we've had recently. It takes up a lot of bandwidth, and so I think there was a recognition that given the only the increased nature of challenges that we're going to see going forward, that we needed a really dedicated resource to be able to help efficiently help the governor's office, the governor, our chief of staff, navigate, all of the incoming that we get kind of post-disaster. So that's the other main function that the office will serve. And I think with that, that's kind of a good summary, and hopefully kind of kept it a little bit brief, all things considered, but I'll turn it back over to you. You might be on mute.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for framing up from kind of the statewide and governor's office perspective, kind of what's coming with the work ahead with this new office and partnering. And again, thank you to our second panelist, Chairman Manuel Hart from the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe. And I'll go ahead and turn it over to hear more from your perspective about the work that's happening on the tribe.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think I have a presentation, but first of all, it is an honor today for the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe to be a part of today's second annual conference. My name is Manuel Hart. I'm the tribal chairman for the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe. Our theme this year is to celebrate 10 years of resilience in Colorado 2023 and beyond. First of all, I'd like to thank all the speakers today and to everyone that put this together. Thank you. It has been an honor to share today's conference with all of you. I'd also like to just mention thank you to Bobby at the beginning and his thoughts and his words from his heart to inspire us all through the poem that he read to each and every one of us. Climate change affects everyone in the world today, but also everything that lives in this world. So could you please pull up my presentation? Thank you. Right here's a picture of the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe. We hold this bear dance ceremony at the beginning of spring as the climate changes, as we go into a new year, as we talk about the different seasons that we go into. Ute Mountain Ute Tribe is a nomadic tribe. They've lived since time immemorial in these Rocky Mountains, pretty much most of Colorado, all the way over to Salt Lake and northern New Mexico. Could you switch it to the next slide, please? As you see here on the map, we used to roam, all of that was our Aboriginal lands. Today, we are in the very corner of Colorado. That's the Ute Mountain Ute Tribal Reservation as our lands go down into New Mexico. And if you look over south of Blanding, we have a small satellite community called White Mesa. We also, in the light brown, have 7 ranches that are off the reservation. So each tribe has different types of land. The orange one is more of a trust land and allotments, and other light brown ones are more of a fee land or restricted fee. The dotted red line is a hunting right that we have from the 1874 Bruno Hunting Treaty. So it's about 3.8 million acres. And that is our hunting right to hunt in this area. And it's a federal hunting right, but we collaborate with the state of Colorado within the last 40 years. Next slide, please. We as the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe started talking about climate and why we wanted to have a climate change program. Our elders started asking what's going on with our world right now and what's happening to winter especially. And we call it a new term. And we started to have a lot of snow, as many of you have lived here a long time in the state of Colorado, original inhabitants of the state, and living here in the 50s and 60s, we used to get a lot of snow. We've had some droughts since that time and throughout our history, but not as much as we've seen today. The warming temperatures during all seasons, less precipitation, long-term drought conditions, change in the seasons. Fire seasons have really become more predominant, diminishing rangelands and increasing. Next slide, please. So as we start to look at that climate change and the resilience projects, natural resource projects, we as the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe have been looking at the water rights, adjudicating Ute Mountain Ute water rights, and we've been working on our New Mexico water rights since we own land down there off the San Juan River and over for the community of White Mesa over in Utah, Southeast Utah. So at this time, we've been looking at this. I started to create a water resource department and looking at a climate action plan. And Farm and Ranch, we have an irrigation system that comes out of one of our water settlements in the state of Colorado. In Dolores, it's called the McPhee Reservoir. We usually get about 24,000 acre feet of water to serve 7,700 acres of farmland. And we usually run about 110 pivots. But 2 years ago, with the drought being as what it was, we only got 10% of our allocation and we're reduced down to 8 pivots. And we had a really hard time because O&M cost comes into play. So it really was a struggling time for our enterprise called Farm and Ranch. But Mancus Creek, we also have some water rights on that. We're trying to do farm improvements now since the drought has been going on, no water running through it. So the Mancus River resilience, we're looking at the project for rangeland inventory to develop recommending grazing destinies. We used to run about 3,000 head of cattle. And at that time, we've been reduced down to about 800 head for farm and ranch and about 800 head for tribal cattle owners. And we usually use that ranch up by Gunnison. It's called the Pinecrest Ranch. We're also part of the Colorado River Basin 10 Tribes Partnership on the tribal water study. We make recommendations through consultation, but not really helping in the decision making, especially on the Colorado water plan. We make recommendations. There's actually 30 tribes in the Colorado River Basin, but 10 of them are in the Colorado River. And that's why this 10 tribe partnership is working together to start working toward a better use of water. Right now, tribal water rights are running down these tributaries, but not really quantified. So we look at some of these management plans, the water quality program, the mitigation plan, the water management plan. We're looking at the San Juan Basin Recovery Implementation Program, the fish. We have to look out for the environment, the fish, invasive plants. Sometimes these invasive plants come in. They're not native species, so we have to look at that. How can we bring back native species, forest restoration, forest thinning projects? As you've seen, the beetle has taken a lot in a lot of the forestry areas. So we try to implement some of these through some partnership programs. Next.
Yep. And Chairman Hart, I just want to give you a soft notice that you are at 6 minutes.
Thank you. I'll try to jump through this as quick as I can. Climate resilience project, renewable energy. There's things that we're looking at right now. We used to be on fossil fuels. Now we're on renewable projects and looking out for the future and how the climate change is impacting us. The tribal council, next slide, please. Next, tribal council resolutions going to support climate change efforts. So we do work with the BIA, state funded, other programs to secure funding for climate action plan. Next, we are starting to look at impacts that happened during the COVID, and we're trying to get a grocery store to help us out because climate change has really impacted us, especially when COVID was going on the last 2.5, almost 3 years now. So we're looking at availability of water, looking at the dry streams. Our mountain called Ute Mountain is where we have our cultural sun dances. A lot of these streams and lakes have all dried up due to climate change, and sometimes our traditional cultural activities. Next slide, please. Tribal traditional and cultural activities have kind of diminished in a way because we lack cottonwood, choke cherries, these plants and trees, medicinal plants that we usually use. And there's some that are on the screen there that we utilize throughout the year, but with the lack of water and what's happening with climate change, it's really impacted some of our traditional. Next slide, please. It's also impacted our wildlife. We don't see as much deer on the mountain anymore or within the tribal lands. So they've gone to where there's more, I guess, groceries for some of these wildlife. And we don't hardly fish anymore because the lakes have all dried up. So everything on declining in the deer and the elk, and then also reduces on the health for us. Some of these are actually helping in our health. So next slide, please. The social economic impacts has stressed us out from the elders to our traditional economic impacts on higher electric bills due to extreme heat. And we just wanted to look at how we can try to move forward. as the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe. Last slide. The Climate Action Plan process 2017 to today. It's trying to secure funding from the BIA Tribal Resilience Program, created for climate change adaptation, working through a group composed of elders, leaders, natural resource, interdisciplinary teams, and community members. So we're working in a joint effort. And this is a picture of our tribal office. So our climate action plan, last slide, is looking out for the overall tribal lands for the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe in all 3 states and working with the council. So with that, I appreciate that. Thank you for letting me have this short time to come in and go over this. And we look forward to any kind of questions. Thank you very much. Have a good day. Toya.
Thank you for sharing, Chairman Hart. I look forward to the conversation. These are some big challenges we have. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Scott Kalman from Routt County.
All right. Hello, everybody, and thanks for the opportunity to talk about our climate action plan and specifically implementation. Great job adjusting, by the way, with the different rooms. That was, a challenge that you guys overcame pretty quick. So good job there. So really, what I thought would be of value for everybody. I know that I know that many of you maybe are working on or planning on developing climate action plans or resiliency plans like we did. And knowing that even if Routt County were carbon neutral, we're still such a small drop in the bucket. But I think that by sharing our experiences in work that we went through to develop these plans, and then also the framework for implementation, that we can expand our impact outside the county. And so that's what I'm trying to do, is talk a little bit about the framework that we have for implementation in hopes that it can help you all with implementing your plans, and hopefully down the road you can help other people, and we'll continue to expand our impact. So we have a plan. Now what? How do we keep that plan from just sitting on the shelf and collecting dust? What do we need to implement? Starts with a framework or in a structure, a way to engage the community, leverage ideas, expertise, funding opportunities, and get things done that you have in the plan. You might have a need for administration. You're going to be having a lot of meetings, and it's important to stay organized, have somebody taking minutes, notes, scheduling, tracking, reporting. Also important to be able to bring in subject matter expertise in your community. You want to be able to develop and manage projects that have been identified in your plan. You want to make sure that you are collaborating with local stakeholders, in our case, also other municipalities. You want to be able to take advantage of funding opportunities that are out there, which as of now, there's a lot. So really good to have a framework in place to try to take advantage of that. And you also want to build credibility. You're trying to influence policy decisions, making recommendations. And so hopefully you can build credibility with those decision makers. So your recommendations make a difference in how they make their decisions. So this is a model of the framework that we have. We have a collaborative board who's in charge of accountability, and then also sector groups in the areas of energy, transportation, waste, land use, water, and economics. And below these categories, we have people with subject matter expertise in each of these groups. And then also an opportunity for partners to provide input to those groups. So talking a little bit about the collaborative board, we started with an intergovernmental agreement between all of the county and the municipalities in the county, laid out really what that board does and how it's structured and how it's going to function. We have one member per local government, and others on set criteria appointed by the local government members, and members of that board are on 1 to 3 year terms. We staggered that so we didn't have everybody leaving at the same time. Overall, the board roles are oversight of direction and development of processes, budget development and oversight, project approval, decision-making, tracking and reporting, oversight on education and outreach, and ensuring consistency and branding of sector education and outreach. The sector working groups, as I mentioned, energy, transportation, waste, land use, and economics. As a recommendation, we started with the group of stakeholders that helped inform the climate action plan and developed the strategies, actions, and tactics. So it's mostly, these groups are made up of those folks who lended their expertise into developing the plan. And so at this point, we have those groups meeting on a monthly basis, and they're looking at the strategies, actions, and tactics, and prioritizing, looking what the gaps are, and starting to make recommendations to elected officials and other decision makers.
And I'll give a friendly reminder that you are at the 5-minute mark right now. So 2 more minutes.
All right, perfect. So just wanted to talk a little bit about trajectory. We spent a lot of the first year trying to build capacity, getting this agreement in place, forming the collaborative, figuring out mission, vision, charter, and bylaws, hiring a management entity, which was a local nonprofit, Yampa Valley Sustainability Council, and they're kind of structured toward implementing the plan with sector expertise for each of those groups, and then also developing workflows and processes. So we're kind of winding up doing that, still working on some processes, and then sector groups have started meeting. And like I said, they're doing a gap analysis, they're prioritizing, and already making recommendation to policymakers, decision makers. And I think we covered the collaborative board pretty well. That's really, they're in charge of accountability and making sure these things get done and that the whole thing is managed properly. And that's all I had. Thanks.
And I think you're on mute.
I keep doing
Can you
that.
hear me?
Morgan, I'm turning it over to you
Okay.
to facilitate the discussion, and we may have a little extra time before going to the full group. We're adapting. Thank you, Scott, for recognizing that we persevered here.
All right. Thank you so much, Anna. And I also want to thank all of the panelists for sharing about the work you're doing. And in those stories, I've also highlighted some of what is necessary for success and some challenges folks might come across. And so before we move to a brief Q&A, I just want to ask the presenters a question just to wrap up what they presented on and tee us up for the entire group discussion that we'll have with everyone in the breakout room. So the question that I would like to pose to the presenters is, reflecting on what has been most challenging, most critical to success, and the work ahead, just please take a minute to share your response to the following question, which is, if you could wave a magic wand and make a wish come true, what is your biggest hope moving forward so that visions for climate adaptation and a more resilient future are realized? And then I'll just select the order in which you all spoke. So Jonathan, I'll pass it over to you first.
I appreciate the question. A magic wand. So I spent a long time in DC working on federal budgeting and appropriations, which is a very depressing field to be in because Congress never funds things at probably the level that they should. And so, I mean, I would say, right, like, on one hand, we have had over the last year an incredible opportunity for a bunch of public dollars to help out with any number of this work. And then at the same time, right, like Anything that comes with federal dollars comes with a little bit of extra challenge in implementing, challenge in using, etc. So I guess I would say my magic wand solution would be a more normalized investment at the federal level in so many of these key priorities, and systems that would be set up to be thinking ahead of avoiding disasters, climate adaptation, you know, to use the word in my office, preparedness, rather than solving problems after they happen, right? Like we look at this with FEMA, and it's we'll have a fire come through, and it is often challenging to then, you know, find the dollars to say, hey, we know that there might be a flood that follows this fire in this specific watershed. We need resources to go out and do X, Y, and Z. And even when we get those dollars, things might happen with, you know, federal land managers or whatever, right? And so the system at the federal level, and what I hope we will do better at the state level, is to set up that system that is expecting and ready for the next disaster, not just responding to the last disaster.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Chairman Hart, I'll pass on the question to you.
Well, I think the most challenging for Ute tribe, and not only just us, but people in general, finance is one of them. As Jonathan mentioned, that we don't put in enough money to take care of things that are changing in our world. Climate change has really come about, and we done it to ourselves in the sense of polluting and not taking care of what was originally the Creator gave us. As Native people, we need to feel that empathy of not just us among people, but us as taking care of these lands, as stewards of taking care of it so it can rejuvenate. But the most challenging part is just educating people about what it is and what impacts it takes to our rivers, to our land, to the ecosystem, to not only humans, but everything in general, from our strengths, like the animals, the four-legged, the winged ones, the ones in the water, and everything that grows through the dirt. And we call her Mother Earth. So that's challenging for all of us. It's just the educating part of it. Today, we take things too much for granted, that it's a lot about living on the asphalt or the cement. But what about the lands in general? These are the ones that we need to really take a look at. And I think our ancestors, whatever ethnic group they came from around this world, really looked at that foundation of how we started and where we're going into the future. So really educating people is probably the biggest challenge, and learning and listening and taking that time to listen and coming up with a plan that really helps us to move forward. So I think that's probably the most challenging right now, is just educating people about and getting the word out. So with that, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Hart. And Scott, I'll pass the mic to you now.
Okay, thanks. I think that my hope is that, you know, we have a lot of momentum right now, and I think we've set up this really good framework. And so I hope that we can keep that momentum up, and keep people engaged, and that we can, in a few years down the road, say that we accomplished a lot, and we learned and we adjusted along the way. And then I also hope that, like I was saying in the introduction, that we can positively impact other people who are doing this work, and expand our impact beyond our borders. And then, like I said, have them expand impacts beyond their borders as well. So that's what my hope is.
Thank you, all of you. Those are really wonderful responses and provides a lot of food for thought. And before we move on to the conversation, I'll do kind of a recap of what we've heard from all the presenters. Are there any burning questions that others in the breakout session would like to ask to any of the panelists? Given time, let's see, we'll have maybe just 2 to 3 minutes for this, but I just want to provide an opportunity for folks to ask a question or two if they'd like. All right. And can we take off the presentation so folks can see one another? All right. Okay, I don't see any hands raised. I don't hear anyone jumping in. So I think I'll move to the next part. So I'd say for this next conversation, we're going to invite everyone in the breakout session, including the panelists, to have a conversation about what is needed to move the needle forward on climate action goals to help build resilience. And there's going to be a couple questions that we posed. And so we'd love to hear everyone's perspective on, what's been most critical to successes, what's been most challenging, things folks which were happening, and then levers of change that are available to do the things that need to happen, and opportunities as well. And so before we do that, I just want to recap a little bit of what we've heard. The presenters have shared a lot. So we heard about some of the things that support this work. For example, there's data and information to help us understand where we are, what are some of the challenges we're going to be facing in the future, and how do we be proactive about addressing that? And that data takes different forms, whether we heard from Jonathan about maybe more, traditional data numbers, and we also heard from Chairman Hart about taking perspectives from the community and taking advantage of some of that traditional knowledge that will play a lot of insight to where we are and where we want to be. Partnerships and coordination also seem to be huge. So across jurisdictions, we heard from Chairman Hart about partnerships between the state, tribe, federal agencies. There's also, we heard from Scott talking about partnerships with the county and the municipalities and other entities. There's also the question of the internal coordination. So Jonathan was speaking to some of hey, we need to coordinate on an interagency basis as we were working to address this statewide. So there's a lot of different pieces there. There's also, we heard about the importance of connecting with communities and community members. Another thing that I heard was resources to get this work done. So it sounds like capacity is a factor that affects his success and might, play into challenges. There's funding, there's governance structures that come into play, whether that's the Mountain Ute Tribes Climate Change Adaptation Working Group, Routt County's Collaboration Board and sector working groups, and kind of some of the interagency work that Jonathan's going to be wrapping together in the governor's office is something that is pertinent. I would love to ask, everyone else in the group to think about these themes and these topics and reflect on if they relate to your work or they seem familiar to you. So the first question I would like to pose to the group is, what has been most critical to successes around your climate planning and adaptation initiatives? And what are some of the biggest challenges? And again, feel free to kind of build a little bit on what we've heard right now. And then also, if there's anything that hasn't been mentioned, feel free to raise it because we'd love to hear. So now I'd love to open it up to the full group to share their experiences around this work and what's been critical to success and what's been most challenging. I think I know we have a couple municipalities in the room. I know there's also a couple, Bernadette Cuthair. I see you have a raised hand. Bernadette, feel free to speak.
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Bernadette Cuthair with the Mountain Ute Tribe, Director of Planning and Development. So around the two things that you had just mentioned is that I believe that in order for individuals, entities to be successful is exactly what Chairman Hart had said, is continuing the education of what things look like prior to our existence and what it looks like now and what it'll look like in the future. Because I think one of the biggest challenges is, or will be, is for all of us as people, as individuals, it's going to force us to look at changing our habits and our practices while we live on this earth. And I think it all comes down to individual action. But, I think it's the awareness of, having our eyes, being aware of our situations was really good in the past, and we're at this point, and what will we look like in the future? But I think those are some of the things that we have to be cognizant of, as individuals, to make sure that we're ultimately, I think it'll come down to we'll be forced to change our habits, really. So, and it's all our responsibility as people that live on this earth. So that's just my comment. Thank you.
No, thank you. It is another really important component and ties in nicely. And I'm wondering, are there any folks on the line who do work at, the intersection of this change we're looking to see in terms of climate and individual behavior? And if you have anything to ask, and I see Celeste has your hand up.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody. It's really been really awesome to attend this. I appreciate it being open for everybody. Right now, I am a research associate to the Oglala Lakota tribe. That's the tribe that I'm enrolled with. And I recently made a map for a GIS course at MSU Denver this past.
Oh, shoot. Oh, no. I think that oh my goodness, I think our sessions were closed. I apologize, you all. Well, in the breakouts, I'm going to do some summaries of what you all had mentioned. But thank you for your patience. And I think that we are being summoned. I think they're just staying on time.